Hello, good morning, mga
Good
katribo.
good
Yeah,
morning mga katribo. Good
Gigi,
morning
good
Chito.
morning.
It's another Wednesday,
Yeah,
August 16. Welcome to another episode of Daily Tribune's Straight Talk. This is where we discuss current issues that matter or interesting to any one of us. This is Gigie Arcilla.
hi, good morning, Gigi. I'm Chito Lozada. We are live on Daily Tribune Facebook page and Tribune Now on YouTube.
Yes, Chito, in this morning's episode, we have a curator from the Ayala Museum to talk about the history of the privately run museum and, of course, the very interesting exhibits and collections that they have.
Uh, mga katribo, let's welcome Marinela Andrea Mina. Hi, ma'am.
Good morning po, Ma'am Marinela.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hi, good morning.
Yes, and we're glad to have you with us this morning. So, pisa na natin,
Yeah.
Chito. We have heard about, kahit noon pa, nung college ako, naririnig ko na yung Ayala Museum. That's in Makati. Ah, pero, I have only been there once. Nakarating ka na ba doon, Chito?
Once or twice.
Yeah, I have been there once. Pero that was long, long ago. And siguro, pwede natin tanungin si Miss Marinela. Tungkol dito sa Ayala, I'm sure it has, already evolved. Baka nga, ang ganda-ganda na niya ngayon. Nung last na puntahan
Yeah,
ko, medyo
ano pa,
dekada na. Yeah. So, ma'am, can you abreast us or for the benefit of our viewers, ano po ba yung parang history and background of the Ayala Museum?
Okay. So, Ayala Museum began as an art and history museum founded in the heart of Makati. It was intended really to be a museum dedicated to Philippine history and an iconographic archive when it was first conceived in the 1950s by the artist Fernando Zobel, who's also a painter. But the actual groundbreaking and the work for the museum began in 1967 under the leadership of Carlos Quirino, who is, of course, a national artist for historical literature. So, under the guidance of Carlos Quirino, the original Ayala Museum research team, along with a team of woodcarvers from Paete, Laguna, put together the iconic dioramas of Philippine history, for which the Ayala Museum is still probably best known. So, since the museum opened in 1974, as you are also a bit aware, I guess, the content of the museum has continued to grow. So, from beginning as a museum of Philippine history and, as I mentioned, iconographic archive, it also had a library, and eventually it grew to have an aviary, and its collections grew to include ethnographic materials. So, these are materials from living cultures across the Philippines, and also a fine arts collection, and also a numismatic collection as well. So there's quite a lot of diverse material being collected by the museum since 1974 until the early 2000s, when the museum decided to formally evolve into an art and history museum. So that is where we are now. And this building, where we're currently housed, is actually designed by the Locsin, the company of architects owned by Leandro Locsin's son. Because the original building was designed by national artist Leandro Locsin.
So it's a museum founded and by local artists. Primarily from Laguna.
Yeah, Paete. Sabi nga, they gathered, sculptors from Paete. So, yung mga pieces nila, do you still house sculptures
Wooden
sa Ayala
sculptures.
ngayon?
But the dioramas are still part of the museum collection. Of course, they're really iconic, and normally when people ask about Ayala Museum, the dioramas are one of the first things that come to mind. In fact, we were featured on the Google Arts and Culture platform, especially with our dioramas, because they're quite unique when they were created in the 1960s.
What
So,
are the
so yes, we do still have those those sculptural works, the dioramas, but also the museum has a fine arts collection, which includes also works by contemporary to modern artists.
At this time, what exhibits and collections can people find in the museum when they visit?
So the dioramas are still there. They're
Dioramas,
housed
okay.
on the second floor. That's a permanent display.
Mm.
But the dioramas, since they were conceived and created up to 1974, obviously the history that they capture is only until the post-World War II period. So
Mm.
the narrative of our history continues. So the museum has since added sections, multimedia sections, to augment the story that was first presented in 1974. And we recently opened an additional section, which is curated by Manolo Quezon, a historian as well, that
Oh.
sort of asks the question of how history can be read through multiple strands as well, of developments of our nation, how the national story actually emerges out of multiple smaller stories as well. So that's an additional feature for the dioramas. But at the fourth floor is our other permanent gallery where we have the Gold of Ancestors exhibition, textiles exhibition dedicated to indigenous
Textiles.
Philippine textiles, and also an exhibition on tradeware ceramics found in the Philippines.
Mhm.
Then
So,
at the third floor, we have our changing galleries, and where we currently have the much talked about exhibition Splendor Juan Luna Painter as Hero.
So
so
that's on the third floor.
oo. How many levels ang Ayala Museum?
We have four floors
Four
used for
floors.
exhibitions. At the ground floor is also our Orientations Gallery, which features a selection of objects from the permanent collection of the museum, as well as the Digital Art Gallery, which is one of the first things you will see when you enter the museum. So it's a huge interactive wall, which encourages guests to touch the images of the different objects from the museum and library collections so that guests can interact with the objects. Though, of course, we know that in museums, we aren't usually allowed to touch the objects directly because of conservation concerns, but the interactive wall allows us to give that experience to guests to feel the interaction directly with the information that's presented.
So Ayala Museum, Chito, has gone a long way since the 1950s.
I
So
suppose, yeah.
yeah, it already evolved. And let me ask Ms. Marinela, how does Ayala Museum contribute to the promotion and preservation of Philippine arts and culture?
Well, yeah. So it's of course part of the mandate of all museums to preserve the story of people. So with Ayala Museum, as I had mentioned, we are an art and history museum. So what our primary research concerns are normally linked to the history of the Philippines and also the various cultures of the Filipino people. So through different programs, through our permanent exhibitions, but also through traveling exhibitions, we try to encourage dialogue with the public
Mamaya.
about who we are, where we've come from, and also perhaps in a sense, what our future may hold. We also have, as part of our fine arts collection, actually, the winners of the Shell National Student Art Collection. So it's well, collecting art is not just about looking at the past, but also potentially where we can move towards in the future. And I think that's something symbolized also in the support that we have for the student art competitions.
How do you engage local artists? Like, do they have to approach you, or do you go out of the way to look for the valuable arts, Filipino arts?
Currently, the museum is not actively acquiring collections
Yeah.
because storage is always a problem
Problem.
for museums, whether here or abroad. Storage is a major concern for all institutions. Of course, we have fixed spaces, and to continue to accumulate collections is another matter. But we do engage with contemporary artists. Normally, for our open space exhibitions that's housed right outside the museum. We have public sculptures, or rather, sculptures in public spaces. so that guests can also see contemporary works.
Ang gusto kong I'm just curious, ma'am. Ano yung traffic nyo, daily traffic of, visitors going to the museum?
Yeah, how artistically inclined are Filipinos
Gaano
right
ba?
now?
Parang it's a gauge. Gaano ba ka, ka-aware na, I mean, how, may mga, has it been generating, quite a number of enthusiasts or, so yun po.
Yes. So something we learned since, of course, the lockdowns of COVID is that the museum going audience that we have has changed quite a lot. Pre-pandemic, the majority of our visitors were, of course, students participating in field trips. So it was a school requirement. But now what we're seeing is there's a lot more foot traffic coming from people who walk in as individuals or with their families. But in particular, the walk-in guests pre-pandemic were mostly from the guests in their 40s to 50s to 60s. So it was a bit of an older crowd. But after the lockdowns had loosened, we've noticed that most of our visitors now are actually younger. So we're getting in a lot of walk-in visitors who are in their 20s to 40s. So there is that shift, and perhaps we average about at least 1,000 a week.
That's a good
So nakita mo ba yung picture, Chito?
Yeah.
Hindi na yan yung una
Para-
kong napuntahan. Yeah,
May
so,
mga interactive,
oo, very ang laki-laki na niya. I mean, it's not the same old, Ayala Museum that I've been to. So, siguro it
Yes.
kailangan
But
puntahan.
in addition to the museum, we also have the Filipinas Heritage Library at the 6th floor. So that's also a valuable resource for researchers who sometimes want to look at specific objects in the museum collection and then perhaps go to the library afterwards to access written resources and publications about different topics related to Philippine art and history.
Yeah. So before we return, before I ask you this question, ma'am, siguro the One Luna exhibit is a permanent activity, is a permanent thing at the Ayala Museum, right? So siguro dun yung ating
Yeah,
susunod
that's,
na tanong
of
when
the
we come
more
back
interesting.
after a short break.
This break is brought to you by Angkas, Beat the Traffic, Bayad Center, #Bigger Better Younger Bayad, and you can buy it all. Conti's Bake Shop and Restaurant, delightfully yours. Globe, atin ang mundo. Meralco, ang liwanag ng bukas. SM, we've got it all for you. Smart, live more today. Union Bank, it starts with you. And Tata Consultancy Services.
Parayan at talakayang showbiz. Times 2. Doble-doble. Kasama ang dalawa sa walang kupas na talakera ng showbiz, Alwin Ignacio at Alex Brosas. DTT Show, tuwing Sabado at Linggo, alas 4 ng hapon. Dito lang sa Diaryo Tirada ng Daily Tribune. A wellness show dedicated to empowering viewers with the knowledge and inspiration needed to lead a healthy lifestyle. Be Well Now, hosted by Miss Cory Crino, every Wednesday at 2 p.m. only here at Daily Tribune's Facebook page and Tribune Now in YouTube. Creative minds, entertainment icons, style influencers. We shine the spotlight on remarkable individuals who shape our cultural landscape. Every Tuesday at 2 p.m. only here in Daily Tribune's Facebook page and Tribune Now in YouTube.
This break is
dives
brought
deep into present issues of leadership, politics, business, and more. Engage in insightful conversations with industry shakers, government leaders, and trailblazers every Wednesday at 10 a.m. only here in Daily Tribune's Facebook page and Tribune Now in YouTube.
We'd like to thank our sponsors for this show, Empire East Land Holdings.
Ayala Land.
Yes, Ayala Land and Philinvest Land.
So,
Straight-
I guess
Yes, and we're
We go
back,
back to,
with our guest, the
guest.
curator of the Ayala Museum, Miss Marinela. Welcome back.
Hi.
Yes. So, balikan ko yung questions before we took a break. So, as you mentioned, yung One Luna exhibit is a permanent, event sa Ayala Museum. It's a fixture already.
and
So-
and the painting
Yeah,
has
and
become
then-
a very controversial
Yeah.
issue.
When I remember like 2 months ago when you opened that exhibit, medyo meron ako mga nabasang reviews about controversy surrounding the the paintings and pati nga yung buhay na ni Juan Luna. So
Maybe we can start with how it landed to the museum.
oo,
Paano
nung
nangyari?
na-retrieve na-retrieve
Nung
yung
artist.
nung artist,
Oo.
and then paano nakarating na sa Ayala Museum.
Okay. Well, actually, the exhibition is not a permanent exhibition.
sorry.
So the permanent galleries are at the second floor and at the fourth floor. So the Luna exhibition is currently at the third floor. That's where we have our changing exhibitions. And how the painting ended up being featured at Ayala Museum is actually through an auspicious conversation with the current owner of the work. That's Jaime Ponce de Leon.
Jaime Ponce.
So, what happened was Ayala Foundation was looking at opportunities for fundraising for our programs, for the educational programs and our social development programs, and there was a meeting with Jaime Ponce de Leon, who had decided to offer up the opportunity to be able to unveil this painting for the first time in the Philippines as a special project to be done in collaboration with Ayala Museum. And so, through months of research, we were able to put together the themes that we wanted to explore in this exhibition. And it was quite fortunate for us, actually, that the timing was wonderful. Of course, the exhibition is also framed within the context of the 125th anniversary of Philippine independence, which is why the museum opened the show on June 9th, right before Independence Day. And we opened the exhibition to the public for free on Independence Day.
It's been gone for about 100 years, right? The painting.
Well, it's not
Or-
entirely accurate to say it's been gone because the painting was never in the Philippines
It
before.
was never in the Philippines. I
Yes,
see.
not to our knowledge, because the painting was actually created by Juan Luna during his honeymoon to Paz Pablo de Tavera while they were in Europe. So Luna had lived in Europe for quite a while. It was while he was in Europe that he painted some of his best-known works, such as the Spoliarium and this painting as well, Jimeno Jimeni. So this work, Jimeno Jimeni, was painted during his honeymoon from December 1886 to 1887, while the couple had traveled between Italy and Paris. And so the last photograph of this work was actually an 1890s photograph of the studio of Juan Luna in his studio in Paris.
So that's how how the artist, was able to start the search for the holy grail of Philippine arts.
So it's a holy grail of Filipino art.
Started from a photo raw of
Well,
Yeah.
there have been collectors, Philippine collectors, who have been looking for this painting in the past. And it exists
see.
also in photographs in certain archives. Even here in the Philippines, there are photo archives that have images of the painting. So we knew that the painting existed, but it was not confirmed who was the current holder of the work.
Is that painting going to be at the Ayala Museum for, like a longer time?
Well, the exhibition will run until the end of this year, until December 30. And then, but the painting is actually on loan to Ayala Museum from the time that we had our first conversation about putting together the exhibition. So it's a 3-year loan beginning October of last year up to 2025.
Would there be a permanent place for the painting since it's considered the holy grail of Philippine arts?
But we can't
Where,
speak of a permanent space for it yet. As I mentioned, so far our negotiation is for a 3-year loan of the painting. And usually museums do put our collections in storage to let them rest after they're exposed for a while. Although the painting is generally in stable condition because it is an oil on canvas work, so it retains its brilliance. But because it has not been out for the public to view for quite a long time and
Right.
has been in a private collector's house for some time, we may consider putting it in storage first. But these are still up for deliberation.
uh So, yeah, we might just as well have the time to look at it.
Until December.
Till
Until
December.
December.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a very interesting painting, and I think many people should see it so that they can better understand also the scope of the work of Juan Luna, because most Filipinos are most exposed to the large, very important but rather tragic painting of the Spoliarium. So it's important for us to also see the not only the dark and somewhat depressing images were ways to stir
Spolarium.
up nationalism, but also other works such as this were able to receive merit and awards in Europe and can also be thus linked to the formation of Filipino pride.
Yeah, maybe it can inspire new
Yeah.
Filipino artists. To
Yeah.
be,
You mentioned a while ago, ma'am, that on the ground floor of the Ayala Museum is an interactive, an interactive wall.
yeah.
So, can you tell us more about this? That would spark interest, for enthusiasts or kahit yung mga sleeping enthusiasts, to visit the museum.
Yes. So the digital wall is located at the ground floor of the museum. It's one of the first things you see when you enter the lobby. So it was intentionally placed there so that guests, upon entering the museum, can get an idea of the scope of materials that we have, and they can also read about the objects there and then. I think one of the concerns a lot of guests have expressed over the years is that normally they find entering a museum intimidating because they think that it requires a lot of knowledge even before you go into a museum. But actually, that's a misconception in a sense because what museums encourage is actually curiosity. You don't have to come
Yeah.
in fully prepared. We are also interested in opening dialogue about things that guests are interested in, and also we like to think of the museum as a space for learning. So the digital wall is really intended to be a way for people to feel more comfortable also as soon as they come into the museum, because we know that in this day and age people are quite used to interacting with digital screens, and it's an easy way for them to be able to break through and get a glance at what the collection holds, but also even listen to some of the audio pieces from the Himig collection of the Filipinos Heritage Library.
Miss Marinela, do you does Ayala Museum interact with schools, and what educational programs or workshops does Ayala Museum offer?
Yes, so yes, we do have a lot of programs that we do with schools. Before the lockdown of COVID, we
Right.
had a lot of traveling exhibitions that we would bring to schools and universities across the country. So we would bring small versions of our exhibitions, reproductions of paintings by Luna, Amarsolo, and Sobel, as well as reproductions of paintings by Botong Francisco, another national artist, and also even an interactive VR exhibition about the execution of Rizal. These are some of the things that we used to bring to schools before COVID. We haven't fully revisited this program because, of course, there is still some concern about health protocols, but it's something we might be revisiting hopefully soon. But in addition to that, we still also, of course, post regular workshops for all ages, really. We have workshops for children, for teenagers, and even for adults. So recently we had an oil painting workshop for adults, and that was in connection with the Splendor exhibition, so that people could also get insight into the painting techniques used in classical painting. But also, we are looking forward to a new project that we're doing later this year. It's a workshop for teens, for them to look at how to start curating exhibitions or perhaps producing artwork on their own, and also creating online content in relation to museum work.
Do you charge anything for these workshops? Or
Yes,
is it
most
for free?
workshops have corresponding fees because um, we also have facilitators for the workshops. So there are fees but they vary for each program. So I don't have them all off the top of my head. And it depends also on the kind of workshop. Some workshops have higher fees because of the kinds of materials that are included, some less.
So, yeah. It's,
Yeah. So
we can
do you have activities outside Ayala Museum? Like, reaching out to local community.
Communities.
It's like, bringing bringing awareness outside the museum. Do you have that, ma'am?
As I mentioned earlier, we'd bring exhibitions to schools before,
Schools.
but it wasn't confined to just schools. We'd also do these in public spaces such as the Ayala malls, so that people could also see the kinds of shows that we would do in Ayala Museum. So we brought these exhibitions to Cebu, to Baguio, among other places. I believe we've also been to Davao and such. So yes, there is quite an active traveling exhibition program as well. But again, that was pre-pandemic, so we haven't been able to fully reignite, I guess, that traveling
Yeah.
program.
How about branching out to other areas of the country? Like you mentioned Cebu. Do you have a permanent place there? Or you just...
No, Ayala Museum has only one building right now. It takes a lot of logistics to run a museum.
yeah, I can imagine.
But historically, Ayala Museum used to run the Burgos Museum actually in Ilocos, but it was turned over to the local government in the, I think, early 90s.
Has the Ayala Museum been involved, in one way or another, in the opening of a museum in Cebu?
Actually, we have been involved in the development of many museums. Not in Cebu. I think you might be thinking of the new National Museum that's just opened in Cebu. But we have been participating in the development of museums in Calatagan, the Enriquez Abel Museum in Calatagan. We also put up the Adamson University Museum back in 2012. So there's a variety of work that the museum does. It's also part of our outreach to other institutions with similar goals.
Okay.
So we'd like to thank our...
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
our
ask you
sponsors.
some more questions, ma'am, after we thank our sponsors. Empire East Land Holdings
Ayala Land.
and Feel Invest Land.
To you by Angkas, Beat the Traffic. Bayad Center, hashtag bigger, better, younger Bayad, and you can buy it all. Conti's Bake Shop and Restaurant, delightfully yours. Globe, atin ang mundo. Meralco, ang liwanag ng bukas. SM, we've got it all for you. Smart, live more today. Union Bank, it starts with you. And Tata Consultancy Services.
Parayan at talakayang showbiz. Times 2, doble-doble. Kasama ang dalawa sa walang kupas na talakera ng showbiz, Alwin Ignacio at Alex Brosas. DTT Show, tuwing Sabado at Linggo, alas 4 ng hapon. Dito lang sa Diaryo Tirada ng Daily Tribune. a wellness show dedicated to empowering viewers with the knowledge and inspiration needed to lead a healthy lifestyle. Be Well Now, hosted by Miss Cory Crino, every Wednesday at 2 p.m. only here at Daily Tribune's Facebook page and Tribune Now in YouTube. Creative minds, entertainment icons, style influencers. We shine the spotlight on remarkable individuals who shape our cultural landscape. Every Tuesday at 2 p.m. only here in Daily Tribune's Facebook page and Tribune Now in YouTube.
We're back here.
Yes, and we're back, and we're still with Marinela Andrea Mina, curator of Ayala Museum. Bago ko itanong yung ating
okay.
yung question mo, Chito. Tanungin ko lang si Ma'am. What does it take to be a curator? Parang if you hear the word curator, parang parang I don't know. When I hear the word, parang napakabigat ng ginagawa. Parang it's an artist, parang lahat ng aspeto ng arts. I mean, a curator has to be, very well
Very knowledgeable about art.
Yeah, there's a variety of practices, curatorial practice. It also really depends on what field you're working in. For example, if you were a curator at a historical shrine, then it would be most important that you're well versed in the history of the space that you're looking at. But I suppose the standard across the board should be that a curator is, of course, familiar with the history and with the context of the materials that they study, that they look at. So, like for example, if you're a contemporary art curator, then it's important that you have good relationships with contemporary artists and you understand their practice, their concerns, etc. But I suppose in our case, in Ayala Museum, because it's it's a relatively small institution and we have a diverse collection. So it's possible that you have a specialization in one particular field. And then we also consult, of course, other specialists for the other materials that we need to feature or that we'd like to discuss. Because, of course, Philippine history and culture is rather broad in itself.
Correct. So what time does Ayala Museum open, Miss Mina? And
So
up
the
to
museum
what
is
time?
open from Wednesdays to Sundays from 10 to 6.
Oh,
So it's
10 to
closed
6.
on Monday and Tuesday.
Yes,
So
we're
is-
closed on Mondays and Tuesdays.
Is there a fee for to visit the Ayala Museum?
Yes. So for visiting all exhibitions, I believe that the fee is 650 pesos for adults, and then the discounted rate, which applies to students, senior citizens, etc., is 350. But if you would like to view only the Splendor exhibition, the flat rate fee of 350 applies. But if you'd also like to visit the museum regularly, it might be more beneficial to avail of a membership to the museum.
So may membership din pala. So do you offer it for free to, sa mga public schools?
Public
Kasi
schools.
there are, budding artists there,
excursions,
would
mga
want to, hindi, specific na lang, wag excursion. Meron talaga mga budding artists who would want to, visit
yeah.
museums. So do you offer or something? I understand you have a discounted rate for students, but then how about for artists who really cannot afford to pay the discounted price to visit Ayala Museum? Do you offer? Do you have this? Do you have a scheme for these students?
We usually have a few days a year that are open to the public as free days. So that's normally on
okay.
International Museum Day, which has been a practice of Ayala Museum since 2011. We open to the public for free on International Museum Day. That's held in May every year. And then we also have occasional campaigns for free days. So we advise that guests look out on they subscribe to our social media channels so that they can be advised when a free day is coming up. But otherwise, the museum fees apply, but there are sometimes occasional partnerships with local government units as well.
I see. So, Ms. Mina, are there any notable artists whose works are prominently featured in the museum? And what kind of particular art can Filipinos see only in the museum?
Yeah, what sets it apart
Sets us apart
Yeah, what
from
sets it
the
apart
other
from other
museums.
museums?
Yes, so of course, the Ayala Museum is still best known for its dioramas. These are, of course, part of our historical collection, but because these were actually designed by artists as well, and they're also handcrafted by local artisans, they can also be considered artworks for the creativity also that went into the mounting of these reimaginings of our history. But in addition to that, of course, we also have the gold collection at the fourth floor, which is one of the largest collections of pre-colonial Philippine gold. And I suppose something that was also synonymous with the Ayala Museum for the longest time is the significant collection of paintings by Fernando Amorsolo, who was our first national artist. So we have more than 30 paintings by Fernando Amorsolo, although not always on permanent display. We also have a gallery that's regularly dedicated to the works of Fernando Sobel, of course, because he was instrumental in the formation of the Ayala Museum in addition to two other museums.
I see.
Okay.
Might be quite expensive in preserving some of the arts pieces.
Question ko lang, may mga artists, I'm sure, I'm just thinking out loud. May mga artists kasi, budding artist, wala pang masyadong pangalan. Who would want, ano yung qualifications that you've set for artworks to be featured in the Ayala Museum?
Well, it really depends because we normally begin with an exhibition concept. So if there is an exhibition concept that we're working on that tackles some of the themes that an artist also has in their body of work, then of course it's something that can be explored. And I also mentioned earlier we have the winners from the Shell National Student Art Competition. So usually we partner regularly with Shell to feature the submissions for the annual competition. That's usually featured in another exhibition here at the museum as well. So if there are students, they may want to participate in these competitions.
And that's yearly? You hold that competition yearly?
Shell, yes. It's
Shell.
Filipino Shell that
Sponsored by
announces the
Shell.
competition, but we are normally the venue partner for the exhibition.
Okay. So, eto.
Yeah, the building itself.
Yeah, yung building. Very interesting. Sabi ko nga, it's not the building
Yeah.
that I
Change a lot.
na alam ko. Kasi dati maliit lang yung Ayala Museum eh.
Correct.
So,
What are,
Sige, go ahead, Chito.
what are the unique features right now, the architecture aspects of Ayala Museum's building? The
So
design.
the current building is designed by the Loxin partners.
Yes.
So it's done in the tradition also of the original building in the sense that, of course, the original building was by a national artist, Leandro Loxin, but it was a two-story concrete structure. The current building of the museum, again, as I had mentioned, has 4 floors for exhibitions and an additional 2 floors in the glass tower, which houses the offices and the Filipinos Heritage Library. So when it was designed, it was really using the contrast between glass and the black granite to sort of have that dialogue between the solid and the transparent spaces. And that we hope that also translates into the way that we have these soft and hard interiors as well of the museum. So there are also travertine and wood surfaces and granite surfaces within the space of the museum as well. So it was really designed as a bit of a dialogue also in contrast.
See.
So, Miss Marinelle, so before we ask for your last words, can you invite our viewers to the Ayala Museum? I mean,
Every Wednesday to
yeah,
Saturday.
at least they know where is it located, exactly where it is, what time is it open, how much do they have to prepare, or anything.
Yes. So we encourage everyone to come visit us at Ayala Museum. So again, it's located in Makati City at the corner of Makati Avenue and De La Rosa Street. We're open from Wednesdays to Sundays from 10 to 6. And we have several floors of permanent exhibitions that talk about Philippine history. And also, if you're curious about pre-colonial identity of Filipinos, it's also interesting to visit our fourth floor galleries. And we have on our third floor changing exhibitions that feature works of in the fine arts.
Okay. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, ma'am, for being with us. And we hope to, have you again or to talk about, if there's an exciting exhibit that you have, you're free to announce that on Daily Tribune.
In any future time.
Yeah.
Thank you
And
so much for having me.
okay, thank you, ma'am. And that has been this has been another episode of Straight Talk. And tune in again next week, Wednesday, 10 to 11 a.m. This is Gigie Arcilla.
So I'm Chito Lozada. You can catch us in Facebook,
Facebook
and YouTube.
YouTube. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.